The twins rose from the green banks of the Green Fork like twin gauntlets, brick red in the pale dawn. A drizzling mist clung to the moss-covered stones, softening the sound of horses stamping in the outer ward and dimming the torches that snapped and sputtered in the breeze. Somewhere beyond the ramparts, a war horn gave a single, low moan. A Northman's horn, long and mournful as the wind across the snowy hills. The sentries on Walder Frey's western tower stiffened, peering into the gray. Half a heartbeat later, every horn on the far bank answered in unison, their cries rolling over the river like thunder. Caitlin Stark stood atop a parapet, wrapped in a cloak the color of freshly fallen snow. Below her, the campfires of the young wolf's host guttered in the damp air, then flared brighter as men heaped fresh logs upon them. It was a signal Robb had devised with Bryndon Tully, a play of fire and fog to mask the movement of the river crossing. Even now, iron-shod hooves churned through the shallows where the Green Fork bent in a narrow oxbow south of the bridge. Thousands of men, the great mass of the northern host, were splashing across before the Freys knew how many enemies the morning had brought them. She felt none of the triumph her son's war council had predicted, only dread. A raven had come in the night from River Run. Edmure still bled, but he would live. The castle held, though Tywin's van pressed hard upon its walls. Sir Bryndon wrote of dwindling stores, men too weary to mend crumbling battlements, and fires that burned through the dark like brands of despair. River Run needed Robb's sword more than ever, yet here they stood at the twins, bargaining with false smiles for a betrayal they could ill afford. A sudden roar swept along the battlements. The eastern gate burst inward. The Frey men-at-arms staggered beneath a rain of stones hurled from the murder holes, yet the attackers came on. Stark spears glittered through the smoke. Over the clash, she heard the cry, "The wolf!" and another voice, clear as a bell, "Winterfell!" Robb's plan had turned on Walder Frey's vanity. While Lord Bolton's vanguard threatened the north gate with ladders and shields, small clothes stuffed beneath their mail to mute the rattle, Robb himself led Grey Wind and 200 riders into the great hall under the guise of renewing a wedding pact. He carried no sword, only a letter bearing the direwolf sigil and a waxen ribbon of silver. His bodyguards were unarmored, save padded coats, their swords peace-bonded. They rode beneath a white banner to lull Frey guards into a careless watch. But as Robb knelt before the high seat, a second horn had sounded, the hush before the slaughter. Davos Seaworth's smuggler crews, braving the river under cover of night, had rigged tar barrels beneath the foundations of the western tower. A single spark, a muffled blast. Stones cracked and shifted. The bridge quaked. While Frey guards screamed that the twins were falling, Grey Wind tore out the throat of Sir Ryman Frey. Robb Stark drew a hidden dirk from his boot, and Walder's favored heir bled across the dais in crimson arcs. Chaos spread through the corridors like wildfire. Northern men hidden in the cellars flung open sally ports. The Bolton feint became a hammer blow. In the smoky darkness, men mistook friend for foe. A dozen Freys hacked down their own cousins before they died beneath the cry of, "For the North!" An hour later, Robb strode into the courtyard, his armor buckled, mail dark with gore. Grey Wind padded at his side, muzzle red. Ahead, the old bridge lord was kneeling, wrists bound behind his crooked back. Walder Frey's sallow face sagged with disbelief. "You gave your word," he croaked, spit flecking his lips. "Guessed right." "You broke guess right at White Harbor," Robb said, voice hoarse. "Bread and salt did not stay your hand when you slew men sworn to house Manderley under your roof. One betrayal begets another." He signaled the Grey John, who yanked the old man to his feet. Caitlin descended the steps, her eyes on the trembling lord. She remembered another hall, another plea for mercy, and a dagger against her son's life. Walder Frey, for treason against the crown of the North, for murder and perfidy, the sentence is death. Her words felt like iron in her mouth. Robb drew ice, the ancient greatsword of House Stark, its rippled Valyrian edge reflecting the lantern glow in a cold sheen. Rain hissed upon the blade. Walder Frey tried to stand tall, but his bones betrayed him. The years had twisted him like a dead tree. "A curse on you, Wolf King," he spat. "A curse upon all your line." Ray Wind's low growl rumbled in the stillness. Robb lifted the sword, muscles bunching. With one fluid stroke he severed head from shoulders. Walder's blood sprayed black across the rain-slick stones, steaming in the chill dawn. The head rolled, coming to rest at the base of the tower that bore his name. A hush fell over the courtyard, broken only by the patter of rain and distant shouts of surrender. In that quiet, Caitlin watched her son wipe the blade on Walder's cloak. There was no pity in his face, only a grim resolve that chilled her more than autumn wind. The boy who rode south to avenge his father was gone. In his place stood a king tempered by loss, by betrayal, by the knowledge that honor alone could not win a war. They buried the Frey dead in a mass grave outside the western walls. With spades and shovels stolen from the keep's own stores, Stark men worked as crows wheeled overhead, their harsh cries echoing over the water. No songs marked the burial, only the pitiless rhythm of shovels biting earth. The choice had been Robb's. "Let them feed the worms they fattened on deceit," he said. "The riverlands will sprout cleaner crops for it." Inside the twins, banners of the cross towers were torn down, trampled beneath muddy boots, replaced by deery wolves and silver trouts. Sir Brynden rode in from River Run 2 days later, gaunt, his black cloak reeking of smoke and horse. He bowed before Robb in the courtyard where Walder's blood still stained the stones. "Your Grace," he rasped, "Tywin Lannister marches north with 20,000. Edmure recovered enough to command, but our walls are breached in 3 places. We cannot hold another fortnight." Robb's council met in the solar once used by Lord Walder to count his wife, children, and coin. They gathered around a scarred oak table, Caitlin beside her son, Great John Umber, Roose Bolton with pale eyes unblinking, Mage Mormont in a mail shirt stained by swamp water, and Dacey riding with the Outriders. Sir Brynden spread maps, stones marking host movements like pieces in side tower. Sir Gregor holds the Tumblestone Ford. The bastard of Derry rides in his shadow with half his strength. Lord Tywin crosses the Red Fork at Stonehenge by tomorrow's dawn. "Too many wolves, not enough teeth," the Great John muttered, spitting on the rushes. "We can still bite," Robb answered. "The twins are ours. The Frey levies bend the knee or join their lord in the earth. That gives us 8,000 fresh spears." "Farm boys," Meg snorted. "They'll piss themselves the first time a Lannister horn sounds." "They know the price of failure," Roose Bolton said softly. His lips curved in the faintest smile. "Fear can stiffen a back, as well as loyalty." His leather gloves creaked as he folded his pale hands. "Yet time is a sharper blade. Tywin will not tarry. Every hour we remain here is an hour his gold-shod behemoth closes upon River Run." Robb frowned at the map. "Lord Blackfish, how many days until River Run falls, if we do nothing?" Brynden's gray beard twitched. 8 Tywin's pace? 10, i.e. less if the bastard of Derry turns his outriders loose to steal every chicken and bushel of oats from the countryside. The small folk will starve before winter. Nemmer Dalad Hal. Caitlin watched her son as he traced the river with a finger. "Then we must strike first," he murmured. "If Tywin wants the riverlands, let him bleed for every acre. We hold the twins, the neck of his advance. A dagger poised at his rear will unman him as surely as steel against his soft belly." Heads nodded. Plans unfurled like banners in the candlelight. They would march south along the Green Fork's eastern bank under cover of night, leaving a garrison of 3,000 within the twins to hold the bridge. Bolton's column would veer west, a ghost army in the fog, feinting toward Stonehenge to draw Sir Gregor away from the ford. Meanwhile, the main host, Robb's wolves, Brynden's trouts, Meg's bears, would skirt the edges of the boglands until they emerged behind Tywin's baggage train. "Cut the lion's tail," Brynden said, satisfaction warming his gravel voice. "Without supplies, no army marches." "And a River Run?" Caitlin asked. "I will ride ahead with 200 picked men," Robb said. "We shall slip inside River Run by the postern gate. With Frey colors gone, the garrison will know friend from foe." His smile was thin. "Sir Adam Marbrand commands the siege. A valiant knight, but cautious. He will not risk storming the walls with a Stark host loose in his rear." Caitlin's heart twisted. She had lost one son to a traitor's blade. Now another risked all on the toss of a sword. Yet she saw no fear in him, only that same iron resolve. "Then may the gods grant you swiftness," she whispered, touching his cheek, "and wisdom enough to know when to break a siege, and when to break a siege commander." He pressed his brow to hers, as once he had done as a child seeking comfort after nightmares. "I will not fail them, mother." The march south was a blur of rain and mud. Hoofs sucked at the earth. Wagons bogged to their axles. Men cursed in a dozen tongues. Yet morale soared higher than Catelyn had seen since Renly's storm clouds gathered over the stormlands. Frey banners, those that surrendered, now bore fresh direwolf stitched atop the towers, as though the grey wind had leapt down to claim the foundation stones. The men took to singing a new chant around their fires. "The Wolf Bridge's bones," it went, a grim echo of the Bridge Lord's end. On the fifth night, as crescent moonlight silvered the river, scouts raced into camp with news. Tywin's host lay ahead in two great wings, one massing near the Red Fork, the other stretched in a glittering line of steel and torch fire along the south bank. Between them, lumbering wagons laden with wheat, wine, and gold crawled beneath banners of crimson and gold. The lion's pride was overextended. Robb called the banners in a hush before dawn. Torches were extinguished, leaving only the stars to witness their oath. Catelyn moved among the men, murmuring prayers to the old gods. May the trees remember them. May the ravens carry their names to the high branches of Winterfell. She stood beside Grey Wind as the direwolf tossed his great head to the breeze, nose quivering. Somewhere in that darkness, Catelyn felt a presence, as though Ned watched from the hall of his fathers, his ghostly voice whispering, "War makes orphans of us all." Long spears tipped with rag-wrapped torch heads lit as one, a line of forgotten constellations on the ridgeline. They flooded down upon Tywin's wagons like a river released from the crags. Arrows hissed from both flanks, cutting down outriders before they knew they were flanked. Fires leapt upon canvas and straw. Horses screamed, rearing as barrels of Dornish wine exploded in purple fountains. Amid the chaos, Grey Wind bounded over overturned carts, his howls splitting the night. Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, was nowhere near the baggage train. He slept in a command pavilion of scarlet silk, 3 leagues distant. But his captains felt the bite of wolf's teeth. Marbrand's reserve galloped north only to find the river ford barred by Bolton's men, shields locked. And when dawn rose bloody on the ramshackle field, Robb Stark reined Grey Wind before a circle of captured banners. Cersei's golden lion snarled prettily upon its crimson field. But its holder, Sir Kevan herself, knelt bareheaded beside a dozen other knights, bound and despondent. The lion's roar had become a whimper. By the time the ravens reached King's Landing, the city's chroniclers wrote of the Battle of the Ashen Wagons, where Tywin lost half his grain and a quarter of his coin to the audacity of a wolf boy. The small folk whispered that the gods favored the north, that Robb Stark's direwolf was a ghost sent by the old gods to punish lion pride. And in White Harbor, Lord Wyman manderly declared open support for Robb's crown. Galleys laden with salt pork and onion sailed upriver to feed the army. The river lords, seeing Frey treachery repaid in blood, rallied behind the trout and the wolf with newfound fervor. Even the Ironborn, prowling the western shores, grew cautious. A wolf born on the green banks might bite a kraken that ventured too far inland. Yet war is a many-headed serpent. Cut one head, 2 more writhe free. Tywin retreated toward Harrenhal, scorched earth behind him, leaving villages plundered, fields salted. Sir Gregor lingered in the Trident, torching every hamlet in his path. Bolton's men shadowed him, but never engaged. Catelyn distrusted Bolton's silence more than Lannister's steel. Roose wrote of opportune delay, of bleeding the lion by leechcraft. His letters smelled of damp parchment and secrets. At River Run, the siege lifted like a morning fog. Edmure staggered to the walls, cheeks sunken, but his eyes bright when he saw the trout streaming over the banners atop the eastern tower. He embraced Robb in the gatehouse, weeping thanks. The damage was grave. Catapults had smashed the south bulwark, half the fish ponds were poisoned, crops along the tumblestone lay in ruin. But River Run still stood, and the Tully line walked its halls. Blackfish Brynden took command of the defenses anew, his laughter echoing off the ramparts. "The old fortress hungers," he said, clapping a gauntlet to the stone. "Feed it, Lannisters." In the great hall that night, Robb's leaders feasted on what little stores remained. Bread thin as wafers, and stringy river trout seasoned with salt. Yet the songs were loud, the wine flowing. Great John Umber slammed his horn on the table. "Here is to the young wolf, king of battles," he roared. The men cheered, banging shields. Catelyn watched her son answer toast after toast with a weary grace that belied his 21 years. The mantle of kingship weighed upon his shoulders like the bear cloak of Mormont. She saw lines at the corners of his eyes, carved by sleepless nights. When the hall began to thin, she approached. "Your father would be proud," she told him. He turned, blue eyes weary. Would he? Or would he fear what I become to win this war? "Nandaven, you have done what honor allowed, and what survival demanded. Walder Frey was no innocent. Your men needed justice." "Justice," Robb repeated. "I took a man's head in cold blood. Once a sword is drawn, we choose who lives and who dies. That changes a man." "It must," she said softly. "If it did not, you would be a monster." He ran a hand through tangled auburn hair. "I fear there are monsters at this table wearing wolf skins. Bolton, Karstark, even some of the Frey knights who bent knee too quickly. Fear is no cloak for loyalty. I need hearts that beat for the North, not for gold or grudge." He glanced at the hall's dark corners, where shadows pooled like ink. "This war may yet devour everything we love." Catelyn laid a hand on his arm. "Then hold to that love. Let duty guide your sword, but love temper your rule." He managed a ghost of a smile. "Father's words in your voice. And my mother's before me. We pass them on, hoping they root deep." The autumn weeks passed, in a blur of campaigning. Tywin fell back to the burned shell of Harrenhal, ceding half the riverlands to wolf banners. At the Twins, the Frey host, shorn of its lord, split along bloodlines. Black Walder fled, trying to claim Seaguard by marriage, only to be captured by Mallister outriders. The bastard Walder Rivers, left in command, found his men mistrusted in every village. When winter's first snows dusted the stones, Walder Rivers knelt before Robb in Riverrune's godswood, offering fealty in exchange for mercy. Robb accepted, then bound the bastard to a northern marriage pact that carried him to Lonely Bear Island among the Mormonts. A Frey in the far north, far from rivers and towers, seemed punishment enough. But victories breed new ambitions. Lords who once doubted the young wolf now pressed for bolder strokes. "March on Harrenhal," urged Karstark. "Break the lion's back and ride for the throne." The great John clamored to sack Lannisport, while Brynden cautioned patience. "Salt the wound, not drown in it." It was Roose Bolton who proposed the scheme that would shape the war's next turn. "Send ravens south," he said, voice a bare whisper. "Offer the Reach Alliance, Margaery Tyrell upon the North Throne beside your Gracie's own. Highgarden's grain and gold could choke King's Landing before spring." "Margaery has promised her Renly," Catelyn reminded. "Renly is dead," Roose replied, his smile thin as flayed skin. "The Tyrells know Baratheon coin is spent. They await a victor." The council debated until candles guttered. In the end, Robb dispatched Maester Vyman with letters sealed by Direwolf and Trout. Whether Highgarden would heed a wolf's courtship, no one knew. News traveled on raven wings. Stannis' fleet shattered at the Blackwater, Renly's green banners now flying beside the lion in King's Landing. Joffrey still sat the Iron Throne, but the realm whispered he bled from a dozen cuts. The Reach lords grumbled at Lannister avarice. The Dornish watched the chaos with sharp eyes. In the north, deep snows fell upon Winterfell, sending white silence across its burned husk. Theon's Reavers had put the towers to fire before he vanished into the Wolfswood. Bran and Rickon were yet missing, presumed dead by many. Robb bore that grief as another iron upon his heart. Catelyn rode alone, one dawn to the hills overlooking River Run. Mist filled the low valleys, and geese honked overhead, winging south to warmer marshes. She knelt, head bowed. Old gods, new gods, whichever will hear, watch over my children. Let Bran and Rickon live, lost but living. Her voice cracked. And guide Robb's hand, lest victory cost him his soul. A soft crunch of leaves heralded footsteps. It was Robb, bearing 2 cups of hot mulled wine. He knelt beside her, offered the steaming mug. I dreamed of father last night, he said. He stood upon the battlements of Winterfell, snow in his beard. He looked at me, but there was no judgment, only sorrow. He said, a king who kills must weigh every life he takes against those he would save. I awoke before I could answer. Catelyn sipped the wine, breathing the clove-spiced steam. What would you have said? That I will weigh them, but the scales seem always tipped by fate. He gazed over the mist-shrouded hills. When I struck down Walder Frey, I believed it would save thousands. Yet each day's reports bring new deaths upon the Trident, the Tumblestone, the Golden Tooth. Did I truly stay a hand or loose a bloodstorm? Nain. The storm was already coming, she said quietly. You could only choose where its lightning struck. He nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Tywin rebuilds at Harrenhal. Word is he summons reinforcements from the west and south. He means to fight a war of attrition, starve us, freeze us. We must not allow it. You would assault Harrenhal? Not head on. The Blackfish scouts a new route through the God's Eye. An old fisher tracked the lion sentries overlook. Robb's tone hardened. I will end this war with one swift stroke. Beware fortress legends, Catelyn warned. Harrenhal eats armies. A curse in its stones. He smiled, a flash of wolfish daring. Then we will feed it lion meat and free the Riverlands for good. He rose, helped her to her feet. Come, we ride at dusk. Under a new moon, Robb Stark's chosen vanished into reeds along the lakeshore, poles whispering through black water. Gray wind swam the channels like a silent shade, his fur slick with mud. The fisher track wound beneath willow branches and half-sunken boathouses, emerging at Harrenhal's ashfield within arrowshot of the breached south wall. Wind moaned through the towers, jagged crowns like the dead lamenting. Fires flickered beyond collapsed archways where Tywin's men huddled against chill. The assault broke like a thunderclap. Torches hurled over ramparts burst into fountains of flame, lighting the yard as wolves poured through the gap. Horns blared. Gray wind's howl rose higher. Catelyn watched from a rise, her breath plume in the night air. The castle's maze of courtyards became a killing ground. Stone Kingspire collapsed in a roar, crushing half the lion's stables. Amid the carnage, Robb hunted for Tywin, but the lion had slipped away an hour earlier with a picked guard, warned by some whisper in the dark. Still, the victory rang like a stolen bell across the realm. Harrenhal was Robb's. Within its vaults, they found stores of barley and corn enough to winter an army. In its dungeons, they freed prisoners. Stark men captured at Whispering Wood, Riverland sergeants taken at the Red Fork, and a gaunt, shaven knight calling himself Sir Jaime. Catelyn met him in chains on the ash yard. His once golden hair was matted, his eyes haunted. Lady Stark, he rasped, I had thought the twins my tomb. Send a raven to Cersei. Tell her I live, and her son's war is lost. She studied him. Your sister's war, perhaps. My son's continues. Does it? Jaime's laugh was brittle. Tywin bides his time. He will bleed you until you drown in ghosts. Nantarmin? Catelyn felt a cold shiver. Your father fled. He recalculates. A lion attacks only when sure of its claws. Beware his next pounce, wolf. She turned away. Yet Jaime's warning echoed in her mind long after chains rattled shut. Winter crept in earnest. Snow dusted the hills. Supplies from the Twins and White Harbor flowed, though ever slower through icy rivers. In Harrenhal's vast kitchen, fires roared day and night as cooks boiled oats and onions into thick gruel. Robb's men ate drilled and waited for Tywin's riposte. Scouts spoke of lions prowling the Westerlands, of bloody mummers raiding caravans, of a falcon banner glimpsed in the foothills, Perhaps the veil stirring at last. Letters came from Highgarden. Mace Tyrell drunk on feasts, but his mother Olenna wrote in crisp script, seeking terms. A marriage for alliance, but the bride she offered was not Margaery, but a lesser Tyrell cousin, too young to wed soon. Robb burned the letter unread to his council, his patience frayed. Bolton slipped from camp under cloak of night, claiming urgent business in the Dreadfort. Some whispered he meant to bring fresh northern levies, others that the red-flayed man of House Bolton had scented opportunity in the chaos. Greyjohn watched him go with a scowl. "Hell twist on a wolf hook, mark me," he muttered. As moons turned, Harrenhal's curse whispered in darker corners. Men found dead in their tents, throats opened by unseen blades. Stores vanished. A steward confessed to stealing grain for gold, but swore a shadow commanded him. Robb posted double watches. Superstition thickened like smoke. In late frost a raven beat from the neck. Winterfell still burned, but Bran and Rickon were alive, carried north by wildling Osha. They sheltered at last hearth with Lord Umber's brother. Joy rippled through the camp like sunlight. Catelyn knelt by the heart tree in Harrenhal's godswood, tears freezing upon her lashes. For a moment, hope felt possible. Tywin struck 3 nights later. Harrenhal's towers loomed against a starless sky when horns blared from the outer bailey. Catelyn jolted awake to grey winds howl. Flaming arrows rained across the lake, their reflections dancing on black water. Ziga towers, drawn by oxen cloaked in wet hides, lurched toward the breach. The western gate exploded beneath a ram of ironwood. Out of the smoke poured men in half-plate dyed crimson, but bearing no sigil. Sellswords bought with Lannister gold, unleashed by Roose Bolton's treachery. Bolton's urgent business had been parley with Tywin. He guided the lion through secret fissure paths, the same route the Starks had used. Now the trap sprung. Catelyn raced through dim corridors to the central keep. Robb stood upon the steps, blade bare. Flames licked the yard. "Mother to the stables. Take the Blackfish. Ride for River Run. I will not leave you. You must. If I fall, someone must rally the River Lords." Grey wind snapped at a charging sellsword, tearing hamstring from thigh. Robb shouted orders, eyes aflame. The Greatjon rallied umber axes beneath the broken teeth of Tower of Dread. Meg Mormont fought back to back with her daughter, bare banners rippling. Yet Bolton's flayed men struck deep, knowing every twist of the passages. Fires leapt from storehouses. Tywin meant to turn Harrenhal into a pyre. Amid the chaos, Catelyn found Brynden at the stable gate, bloody sword in hand. "The horses are scattered," he grunted. "We'll have to cut our way." A horn blast cut him short. 3 throaty calls. Not lion or wolf, but something else. From the trees beyond the bailey, armored men streamed forth beneath sky-blue banners rimmed in bronze, the falcon of Arryn. Sir Bryndon's eyes widened. "The Vale," he breathed. Through smoke rode a tall knight in winged helm, Lord Nestor Royce, voice of the Vale, leading 5,000 men sworn to Lady Arryn, guided south by Petyr Baelish's silver tongue and promises of debt forgiven. Their flank charge smashed into Bolton's men like a landslide. Sellswords broke. Tywin's plan buckled under the weight of the falcon's talon. Robb led the counterstroke. Across burning courtyards, steel rang on steel. The young wolf found Roose Bolton near the Godswood gate, half his guard dead. Bolton's pale eyes widened as Robb advanced, grey wind at his knee. "You chose the wrong side," Robb said. Bolton's smile twitched. "Sides are but stories we tell, after wars are won." He drew a dagger of weirwood and Valyrian steel, pale and dark entwined. "This war ends tonight." They circled, torchlight casting savage shadows. Catelyn watched, heart a drum beat. Bolton feinted, blade flickering. Robb parried, riposted, steel screamed. Grey wind lunged. Bolton slashed, catching the direwolf's shoulder. Grey wind howled, staggered, blood spraying. Bolton thrust for Robb's heart. Robb twisted, blade glancing off mail, and plunged ice through Bolton's breast. The flayed man gasped, eyes wide in disbelief as his own blood blossomed, like a red flower. He crumpled, dagger clattering across stone. Silence fell, broken only by crackle of flames and Bolton's rasping breath. Grey Wind limped to Robb's side, muzzle pressed to his hand. The yard filled with Vale knights and Northmen, banners coiling in smoke. Tywin's men fled into night. Robb knelt beside Grey Wind, hands gentle on the matted fur. The direwolf's wound bled freely, but he licked Robb's cheek, tail thumping weakly. "Hell live," Catelyn whispered, kneeling. She pressed a strip of cloak to stem the blood. Robb rose, looking to the embers of Harrenhal's shattered walls. "Bolton is done. Tywin failed. The war turns upon this night." Brynden emerged from the smoke, face streaked with ash. "Lord Royce asks audience. The Vale rides with the North, if it means an end to lion claws in the fingers." Robb nodded. "Then tomorrow we march. First River Run, then King's Landing." "And after?" Catelyn asked, fearing the answer. He met her gaze, eyes bright as cold steel. "After we come home. Winterstorm Hall." So the men renamed Harrenhal after that night, became the crucible of the realm's new order. The Val's grain stores shored up the North's reserves. Arryn falcons nested beside stark direwolves on banners stitched by river maids. Tywin retreated west, bleeding men. At the Twins, Lady Stoneheart, rumors spoke of Catelyn reborn by black magic, hunted Frey holdfasts, her band of outlaws stringing traitors from trees. The Riverlands, for the first time in a generation, tasted a fragile peace. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister bartered alliances with Ironborn and sell sales. Yet coin dwindled, and small folk rioted for bread. The Tyrells, slighted by wolf marriage rejections, reconsidered their lion pact. Rumor whispered of Margaery fleeing court disguised as a septa, sailing for Dragonstone to entreat Stannis anew. Robb Stark crossed the Trident with hosts of North, River, and Vale. Grey Wind walked at his side, scarred but unbowed. Edmure rode beside Brynden, Mage beside Dacey, the Great John roaring songs of home. As columns wound south, snow gave way to muddy melt, then green shoots of early spring. On April dawn, the towers of Harrenhal fell behind them, black against rising sun. Before them lay the gold road to the capital. Catelyn rode at her son's left. She remembered the boy who played with wooden swords in Winterfell's yard, laughing as Bran shrieked at each feigned death. Now, a king, forged by war's hammer. She felt the weight of years, the cost, but also a flicker of hope. Perhaps Ned's dream of a North secure and a realm at peace would yet live, carried in Robb's banner, in the howl of a direwolf and the roar of a river trout. Ahead, the Dawn Gate beckoned. Beyond it, destiny waited. Lion's Den, Viper's Pit, Iron Throne. Robb Stark lifted his sword, point toward the horizon, as horns blew in echoing triumph. The war was not won, but for the first time since Ned died on the steps of Baelor's Sept, Catelyn dared believe it could be. Wolves had crossed bridges of bone and fire and still stood. The realm would shake to learn what strength remained in northern hearts when winter ended, and spring's first king rode south beneath a sky of gathering storms. The riverlands unfolded beneath a pale spring sun. Green fields spattered with red poppy and purple clover. The air damp with thaw and promise. Columns of men trudged south along the King's Road, banners snapping in a wind that still tasted of ice. Direwolves flew beside trouts and falcons. The bronze discs of House Royce glittered against breastplates. Umber giants marched with bears and bearded axes. Wherever the army passed, small folk spilled from crofts and watermills to gape at the host that filled the horizon, a living river of shields and spears and snorting destriers. Some cheered, others crossed themselves, fearful that so many swords could only draw ruin. Boys ran after the baggage train begging for scraps, and Robb Stark bade his quartermasters leave sacks of oats in every village the lions had burned. The land must remember the wolf fed where the lion feasted, he said, and so it was. Catelyn rode near the van, grey cloak fluttering, heart a knot of dread and wild hope. Each dawn she woke to the stink of horses and the mutter of men, to the clang of buttered pans and the hiss of fires catching. Each night she slept beneath tents of rough-spun wool, while ravens croaked in the dark. She felt the war settling on her bones, the ache of long days in the saddle. Yet something new pulsed beneath, a fierce belief that this long agony might end. At her side the blackfish shared that faith, though he showed it only in the flinty brightness of his eyes, and the way his fingers drummed the pommel of his sword whenever the horizon shimmered with coppery sunset, as if measuring the distance to King's Landing with every beat. Ahead, Robb rode among his outriders. Gray wind matched the tall courser pace for pace, loping silent as shadow. The direwolf's shoulder was bound with fresh linen, but the beast scarcely seemed to notice. His amber eyes missed nothing, every rustle in hedgerow, every flicker of wing in the thorny brake. Robb's own eyes were much the same. Caitlin saw how he studied crossroads and copses, how he slowed to let scouts whisper in his ear, how he measured sky and soil as though the gods had etched secret runes upon the land. The boy she had birthed was gone. A king rode there, hard and lean, his beard thickening, his gaze sharpened by grief and fire. She loved him no less, but sometimes when he turned she remembered tiny fists flailing and swaddling, a first wobbling step across the great hall at Winterfell, snowflakes melting on rosy cheeks, and her breath caught with the cruel wonder of it. They crossed into the crownlands beneath a rim of low green hills. The king's road turned stony. Farmsteads gave way to charred shells, testament to Gregor Clegane's foragers. Half-burnt orchards stood black and crooked like beggars raising empty arms. Great John Umber cursed the reek each time the wind shifted. 7 hells. The river made a swamp of the south, and the lions salted it with corpses. He spat. We ought to flay the bloody hound with his master's cloak. Meg Mormont answered in her bare rough growl. Flay? Leave such sport to dead Bolton. We break their shields and break their pride. Let carrion crows finish the rest. The great John grinned, respecting plain talk, and the two spent an afternoon wagering who could name the greater tally of dead Freys hung by Lady Stoneheart along the green fort. No one kept score but the wind. Word flew on raven wings that Tywin Lannister had fallen back beyond the Black Water, fortifying an encampment atop the wooded ridges called the Gold Ridge, 2 days' ride west of the city. His strength was less than half what he once commanded. Hunger gnawed his ranks, Sellsword slipped away in the night, and tales of Harrenhal's burning haunted campfires. Yet he was still Tywin, hard as an anvil, and the road to King's Landing ran beneath his mailed heel. Robb's war council gathered beneath a sky of bruised violet that promised rain. Torches guttered round a makeshift table, rough planks lashed to ale casks. Maps fluttered in the gusts. Brynden Tully weighted corners with river stones. Lion holds the high ground, he rasped, pointing a dagger tip to the Gold Ridge's contour scribbles. Scarp slope, bramble thick, 3 dry gullies that funnel attackers like sheep to shearing. He expects we hurl ourselves headlong. We won't, Robb said. Royce, you'll feign a push at dawn, heavy horse, bright banners. Let him think the Vale's pride eager for song. When he forms lines to receive, Umber and Mormont loop through the marshland here. He tapped a pale gap south of the ridge, and strike his flank. The gullies become cages once we hold the lips. Then we roll his line downhill, pinning him against the Widow's Wash. Now then. Roose Bolton would have approved of such cutting strokes, but Bolton lay cold beneath Harrenhal's ashes. Caitlin sensed a grim satisfaction in the great Joan's grin. A wolf hunt. We'll bleed the lion till he begs for winter. Not begs, Robb said, voice low. Yields, or dies. Rain swept in before sunrise. Fine mist at first, then a sluicing torrent that turned earth to mulch. Caitlin watched Robb fasten cloak pins beneath the awning, dark curls plastered to brow. She touched his sleeve. Battles in rain are treacherous. All battles are. He kissed her cheek through cold droplets. Pray to whatever gods remain, I'll do the rest. The horns blew gray daylight across a sodden world. Vale knights in polished scales spurred forth, hooves splashing like mill wheels, banners streaming. Drums pounded in the cedar brakes. The falcon cried challenge. Tywin's watchers on the ridge answered with short trumpets, high and mocking. Lines of pikemen shuffled forward, scarlet cloaks sodden, spear points glinting. Behind them rose the goldwood shields of Casterly Rock's household guard, and the crimson war lions roared upon massive standards of silk that sagged heavy with water. From the hillock where she waited beside Brynden, Catelyn saw it unfold. The falcons charged faltering beneath arrow storms, the Lannister front stiffening. And then, from the shrouded south marshes, a bear roar and a wolf's bellow in one. Meg Mormont burst from reeds, her daughters at her heels, bare helmets dripping mud. Next came the Great Chun, axe held high, a whirlwind of wet steel. Their shield wall drove into the Lannister flank with the weight of a collapsing cliff. Rubies and garnets flashed on split gorgets. Rain mingled with blood. Dark spears appeared on the ridge crest, men of Karstark and Glover, scrambling up goat paths the scouts had marked overnight. Grey wind leapt among them, a grey ghost wheeling through smoke, throat slick crimson tears. The battle raged by fits and starts. Surges, lulls, another surge. Once the mist parted enough that Catelyn glimpsed Tywin himself, armored in lion gold plate chased with red enamel, sword lifted as he rallied a buckling center. For an instant, she thought him a statue, so unmoved he stood amid that chaos, only the rain sliding from his visor like tears. Then a crash of thunder drowned all but the ringing steel. By dusk the ridge belonged to dire wolves. Lannister banners lay trampled in churned earth. The widow's wash ran pink where bodies floated against uprooted alder. Tywin's pavilion was found empty, save for a single bloody gauntlet. Hiss, by the sigil chased upon the knuckles. He had cut free a corridor with his household knights and slipped north toward the Wendwater, leaving half his army to fate. Prisoners knelt knee-deep in wet clay, silent but for dripping helms. Robb, helm beneath his arm, strode the field with mud-caked boots, accepting swords from captured captains. He showed no triumph. When Greyjohn whooped of lion skins for feast hall rugs, Robb only said, "The war is not won while Tywin draws breath." That night they camped among wreckage. Rain ceased. Fires crackled under a sky of torn cloud. Healers moved beneath lanterns, binding wounds, setting shattered limbs, pouring boiling wine into cuts. Catelyn walked with them, steadying hands, whispering comforts. She saw Lord Nestor Royce seated on a stump while a maester stitched a gash across his brow. Saw Greyjohn's laugh become a grimace when he tried flexing a gauntleted hand spiked with someone else's tooth. Saw Mage Mormont sleep, sitting upright, back against a tree, sword across her lap, as though unwilling to relinquish guard even to dreams. In a healer's tent, Grey Wind lay stretched upon straw mats, belly rising slow, a fresh dressing across his shoulder. Robb knelt beside him, stroking coarse fur. Candlelight trembled over the sword at his hip, red flecks still caught in the fuller. He looked up as Catelyn entered. "He will heal," she said. Robb nodded, exhaustion carved upon his face. "Animals mend faster than men. I fear for Royce's jaw, for the Great John's fingers, for lads who never crossed a blade before today." "You fear because you care," Catelyn murmured, brushing hair from his brow. "There are worse flaws in a king." Something like a smile touched his lips, then faded. "Tywin will run to the city, bar its gates, hide behind walls and wildfire. We must reach them first." "Then? How?" She pictured the Red Keep's ramparts, Joffrey's scowl, Cersei's serpentine poise, discontent boiling with each empty granary. "Your men bleed. They must rest. They will rest 2 days while the vanguard presses. Brynden takes swift horse to cut the Rosered behind the city. If the Tyrells truly sway, they may rise then." He lowered his gaze to Grey Wind. "Else it falls to us." 2 days only, she thought, yet nodded. In war, mercy tasted of bitter losses. Then sleep. Dawn comes quick. Scouts raced south, hooves throwing sparks in night. They carried news into the column's heart. Tywin's remnant camped at Sow's Horn, 500 wounded straggling behind. The next morning, Umber outriders swept them aside like dry brush. Men who had shouted, "Lannister!" 3 nights past threw down arms for bread crusts. Catelyn listened as prisoners spoke of hollow wagons, of soldiers gnawing yellowed leather straps. One hedge knight claimed King's Landing, rationed barley broth stretched with sawdust, that the city watch took bribes of turnips to overlook brawls and breadlines. "A city starved fears everything," she told Robb as they shared a crust of hard-baked oats atop a mound of overturned wagons. "Let that fear feed ours," he said grimly. Ravens soared to Winterfell, to White Harbor, to Gulltown. Others winged for Highgarden. No answers came. Caitlin imagined Olenna Tyrell reading Robb's offer, lips pursed, needles clicking as she weighed futures. Did the old Rose believe the wolf could truly unseat the lion? Or would she prefer to watch both bleed while roses climbed blood-soaked walls? On the 14th day after Gold Ridge, the towers of King's Landing crested the horizon, pale against lavender sky, their high windows flashing sun. The black water lay blue-gray below, rippling with wind. Smoke curled from a dozen chimneys, and the faint clang of hammer on anvil carried across fields choked with refugees. Caitlin felt her pulse quicken. She had walked those streets once, beneath banners of stag crowned with antler. Now she returned at the head of a host that bore the direwolf banner of a son who would not kneel. The baggage train encircled the city's north and east sides by dusk, stakes driven, trenches dug. Brynden rode in through the Roserad gate, his cloak charred, his laughter scarce contained. "The gold cloaks barred me." He dismounted with flourish. "So I paid the toll. 100 wolves at my back, and they opened all the same. The city's hungry, guards whisper of mutiny." Robb summoned his commanders in a ruined watchtower, straddling the candlelit moat. Maps unfurled again. The city walls, the mud gate, the great sept, the steps where Ned Stark had bled. "Tywin crawls through Lion Gate tonight," Brynden said. 4,000 able spears no more, the rest wounded or fled. But wildfire still waits on the Blackwater, and 100 scorpions studded on the walls. "Walls break from within," said Lord Nestor, tapping the map's inked streets. "Open a gate for us, and the falcon flies." "Who will open it?" asked Mage. "The butchers of Flea Bottom." "The Queen's brother," Caitlin heard herself say. Robb turned to her sharp. "Jaime." She shook her head. "Tyrion. Tal. He's still master of coin. He knows the cost of famine. He will choose purse over pride if we give him a purse large enough." "Deveduns," Great John snorted. "Give a lion coin and hell by your throat." "Perhaps." She met Robb's gaze, recalling the clever dwarf's sharp eyes in Winterfell's hall, one lifetime ago. "But he hates his sister more than he loves gold. And he knows wildfire nearly doomed them once. Offer him peace, pardon, power, he may shift." Robb studied her. Then the map. "Send a rider under Parley banner. No more than one. Veil armor, steady voice." "Daisy," Mage said. "Daisy," Robb agreed. "Tell the imp. Open the King's Gate by dawn, or watch the city starve under our hooves. In return, he keeps his rank and Casterly Rock's debts forgiven. If he balks, remind him wildfire barrels rot." Caitlin watched Daisy depart beneath moonlight, a single woman on a dappled mare, pale banners fluttering like ghosts. Fear clutched her. Trust a lion? Yet war sometimes demanded wagers with devils. She found rest near midnight, curled in a tent with rush-scent pillows. Dreams came fitful. Ned stood again on Winterfell's battlements, but snow turned to ash on his cloak, and his mouth opened to speak only smoke. She woke shivering, dawn's pink creeping under canvas. Horns brayed outside. Fighters hurried past, half-laced, eyes wild. She flung on boots, rushed from the tent, and there upon the northern rampart of the city she saw the King's Gate yawning wide. Gold cloaks lined the walls, pikes reversed, helms under arms. In their midst stood Tyrion Lannister, hair lank, doublet stained, a white cloth tied round one forearm. Daisy rode beside him, her expression unreadable. Robb mounted Grey Wind's side, sword raised. The host advanced at a walk, ranks tight. Tens of thousands watched from rooftops. Not a bell rang to greet them. The bells had been melted for coin months ago. Instead, a hush greater than storm oppressed the air. Within the gate, Tyrion bowed, cane in hand. "Your Grace." His voice carried thin on wind. King's Landing stands open by order of his lordship the Hand, pending terms. Where is Tywin? Robb asked. Fled the night, dragging Joffrey and Cersei toward Casterly Rock, with what knights remained loyal. Tyrion smiled, a slash of tired gallantry. They left me the city and their debts. I choose to repay both. Robb's gaze flickered over trembling gold cloaks. You choose wisely. Surrender arms. The city is under northern protection. As you say? Tyrion's cane tapped stone. If any refuse the order, I shall hang beside them. I have no wish to test my height against a noose. Catelyn exhaled slowly. The gate had opened without blood. Yet within the walls rose a maze of mistrust, famine, desperate fear. Robb entered the Red Keep by noon. The throne room smelled of dust and stale incense. Spiders had spun cobweb veils across the Iron Throne's twisted blades. Robb stepped upon its dais, only long enough to place ice across the arm of the seat, and turn away. No king of the North sits a southern chair, he said. It shall remain empty until the realm itself chooses who leads. Ravens flew again that evening, to Winterfell, to Riverrun, to Gulltown and Sunspear and Oldtown. Robb's proclamation named a council to mend the realm. Lords from each kingdom, chosen by their own bannermen, to forge a new order free of dragons and lions alike. He called himself Protector of the North and Hand of the Realm in trust, nothing more, until the council met. Some hailed the move as noble, others naive. The small folk cared little. They wanted bread. By Robb's order, the grain stores of the West were opened, and Vale wagons rolled in barley and rye. Mormont and Glover troops patrolled streets, outlawing price gouging on pain of amputation. Smithies hammered shovelheads by night to repair broken levees, while northern woodwrights taught city carpenters the making of tight shelves to store winter meats. On the third day, Olenna Tyrell arrived by river sloop, with half Highgarden's court in velvet green. She swept into the throne room, clucking at cobwebs. A chair of swords is poor seating for decent bottoms, she told Robb. You should melt it. Make plowshares. Real power lies in feeding stomachs. Robb inclined his head. Within hours, Tyrell grain barges slipped upriver under Arryn escort. Not all welcomed the change. The faith militant held silent vigil outside the Sept of Baelor, 7 pointed stars etched on breastplates. Their leader, the High Septon known as Tebald Sparran, demanded a trial for Tyrion as kinslayer and abettor of wickedness. Tyrion answered by hosting sparrow priests to a feast of crusts and watered wine. The king feeds you while the gods watch, he announced. If I find fault, may lightning strike me. No lightning fell. The priests left muttering. Sansa Stark came forth from the maiden vault like dawn through frost. She flung herself into her mother's arms, tears bright. I prayed you would come. She wept again when she saw Robb, kissed his knuckles, whispered apologies for believing Joffrey's lies. Robb smiled, brushed her hair. You are safe. We are Stark. Winter may crack us, but spring finds us standing. Grey wind nosed Sansa's palm and licked away salt tears. Bran and Rickon arrived weeks later, escorted by Galbart Glover and a dozen greybeard archers. Bran rode a wheeled timber chair of the Crannog style, throat thick with stories of sea crows and green dreams. Rickon clutched Shaggy Dog's scruff, eyes fierce. The reunion beneath the godswood of the Red Keep, a pale weirwood transplanted years before, sparked such weeping that even Blackfish wiped his cheek. 3 Starks lost, now found. Only Ned remained beyond reach, save in memory. Summer crept upon the realm. Crops sprouted in abandoned fields. Prisoners hammered stone upon the broken fingers of Dragon Gate. Coppers jingled again in markets where wolves and falcons kept peace. Reports from the west told of Tuin fortifying the crag, sowing alliances with Ironborn chiefs who coveted Lannisport. Yet with the crownlands fed and the reach wavering, his grip slipped. One dusk, Catelyn stood atop the Tower of the Hand, watching swallows wheel above bronze roofs, turned pink. Tyrion joined her, a flagon of arbor white in hand. Your son disarms me, he said, offering the wine. Hay steals victory with mercy. topples fortunes by refusing a throne. How does one scheme against a man who despises crowns? You might try not scheming, she said dryly. He sipped. Impossible. It is all I'm good for. Yet perhaps this realm is ready for something new. Wolves, falcons, roses, no dragons needed. His smile faded. My father will come. He cannot abide a world he does not rule. We will meet him. Perhaps. He turned, leaning on the parapet. And when you do, pray your son keeps mercy in one hand and steel in the other. Tywin respects only the latter. Summer storms battered the coast that month, lightning rippling over the Blackwater as if gods forged fresh swords for battles yet unborn. Word came that Stannis sailed from Dragonstone with a fleet of sell sails hired on Braavos coin. The Iron Bank's patience had thinned toward Lannister debts. Davos Seaworth bore white peace banners, stitched with flaming heart and direwolf alike. Robb welcomed Stannis beneath the broken King's Gate, though tension crackled like bead lightning between them. Stannis' jaw set stark as North granite. I do not kneel to wolves, he declared. I do not ask you kneel, Robb replied. I ask you stand. Stand and judge with the realm's peers. In the great septee before the cracked statue of the warrior, the lords convened. Stark Arryn, Tyrell, Martell envoys, Tully, Greyjoy emissary with uneasy eyes. Even a few black brothers come to beg grain for the wall. They spoke for 3 days, tongues fraying. Stannis argued law, Garland Tyrell argued bread, Doran's envoy argued vengeance. Through it all, Robb seldom rose. When he did, his words fell like steady hammer blows. Justice, union, recompense for small folk first. On the 4th dawn, the council chose compromise forged in colder steel than any crown. A trinity of protectors, until a moot of all lords, great and small, could gather at Harrenhal the following winter. Robb Stark named protector of North and River, Stannis Baratheon protector of Storm and Narrow Sea, Mace Tyrell protector of Reach and Grainlands. The Dornish abstained, but pledged to send observers. The Vale retained autonomy beneath Robert Arryn, with Nestor Royce regent. King's Landing would serve as neutral seat. The Iron Throne melted, reforged into plowshares and building tools under smiths from Qohor, overseen by Gendry Waters, laid of Flea Bottom's forges, raised as royal smith in honor of a fallen king I'd never known. Catelyn stood beside her children on the Red Keep's eastern balcony when sparks flew as first sword bit iron. The clang sang across courtyards. Small folk gathered below, staring as spears of green and blue flame licked wrought blades. Some wept. A throne of hunger gives way to fields of plenty, a septon preached, voice cracking. None cheered, yet a hush settled, hopeful, fearful, as though the city itself dared dream beyond blood. Night fell, and torches kindled along walls. Catelyn walked the godswood paths with Robb. Fireflies winked above dark pools. A frog croaked. Father would find this strange, he said, touching a pale leaf. Father trusted in roots. You honor that? She took his hand. But peace is no easier than war. I know. He looked west, where stars glimmered above distant hills. Tywin sharpens claws. Euron Greyjoy sails a black fleet. Dragons hatch in the east, they say. He squeezed her hand. Yet for this moment the realm draws breath. I will fight to keep it breathing. They walked in silence while willows whispered. At ponds, edge-gray wind waited, tail sweeping fallen petals. Bran's laughter floated from a distant corridor. Rickon's howl echoed after. Somewhere a bell tolled midnight. An old bronze bell spared the furnaces, its voice a reminder of times before crowns and fires. Catelyn closed her eyes and heard, for the first time in too long, more than grief in its toll. She heard beginnings. Autumn returned upon red wings. Ravens heralded a harvest richer than any since Robert's youth. Riverland fields, once charred, now waved gold. Reach wagons rattled north laden with bread and cider. Dornish oranges arrived for sick beds. The city's orphan children, once thin as shutters, tinted cheeks with peach juice. The realm's heart still faltered, but it beat. In the west, Tywin rallied a coalition of leal houses, forging pacts with Greyjoy reavers, and even the Sell-Sail pirate Salladhor Saan. His message to the realm spoke of lawful rule, of wolves howling ruin. War would come again. But for a season, peace hung fragile as frost upon spider thread, suspended in crisp air, trembling yet unbroken. Catelyn rode north at harvest with Sansa and Rickon, returning to Winterfell to see what could be rebuilt. Robb remained in King's Landing, Bran as voice of the old gods at his side. Grey Wind perched beside the throne room's empty dais when council met, a reminder that steel tempered mercy and mercy guided steel. Tyrion served as master of coin still, though he quipped he was now more a beggar than banker. Yet the books began to balance. Each night ravens crossed the sky, messages, warnings, fragments of hope. Beyond the sea, dragons did rise, pale blue hatchlings whispering fire dreams to a silver queen. In the far north, white shadows gathered beyond the wall. Bran dreamed of them, and Robb listened. But on one golden afternoon, as the last apples ripened in orchards north of the Trident, a flock of geese lifted in perfect arrow shape, beating wings toward southern sun. Their calls echoed over the fields. Farmers leaned on scythes, and children pointed, laughter bright. Winter would come again, as ever, yet for this day the land wore peace like a garland. And somewhere beyond the walls of Winterfell, a dire wolf's cubs tumbled in fresh fallen leaves beneath a sky that, for the first time in a generation, knew only the distant drums of living hearts. And that sound, Catelyn thought, as she stood upon Winterfell's rampart, watching the dusk paint river and stone in rose and violet, was worth every mile, every tear, every sword raised in sorrow and in righteous wrath. For as long as hearts beat so, as long as bridges of bone could bear the weight of mercy, a wolf's dream might yet outlast the longest winter. Snow fell, quiet as remorse. On the ramparts of Winterfell, the night the white raven arrived. Its feathers, bleached by the maesters of Old Town, matched the flakes that whirled in the lantern glow, so Catelyn nearly mistook it for winter's herald. A stable-boy caught the bird in his mittens, eyes wide, and bore it to the great hall where fires roared, and Rickon chased Shaggy Dog between benches. Bran looked up from maps of the wall as the raven clacked its beak. The wax on its leg was tully red. Catelyn cracked the seal with thumb and forefinger. The parchment smelled of smoke and sea salt. The words, penned in Robb's firm strokes, bore urgency hotter than the hearth's coals. Tywin had sailed from Lannisport in secrecy. 24 dramans under black sails crewed by Ironborn, their prows carved as kraken. They rounded the arbor and struck the Mander estuary, torching grain fleets bound north. The Reach cried for succor. Worse, ravens from White Harbor spoke of raiders plundering Flint's Finger and Tallheart lands, their banners ragged black, stars bleeding salt tears. The letter ended. Gather what men can be spared, ride south by the King's Road. Harrenhal convenes at midwinter. I need stark blades at my back. Keep faith. Bran's thin fingers tightened on the map. Bite. If the Ironborn raid the coast, they'll cut the grain lifeline. The south might starve before spring rebirth. Tywin strikes at bellies, Catelyn said. He knows swords follow stomachs. She turned to her sons. We ride at dawn. 200 riders left Winterfell's gates beneath banners, stiff with frost. Galbart Glover led the van. Rickon insisted on riding his shaggy Garon alongside. Shaggy Dog trotting. Spearmen of the new Wolf Guard, gray and white cloaks, clasped with melted throne iron, formed the column's spine. Maester Luwin remained to watch the castle. Bran, borne in his wicker chair by stable hands, traveled with them, owl-eyed, a feathered cloak swallowing his shoulders. Nights were long, the northern sky, a vault of broken diamond. Around low fires, the men spoke of ghosts haunting barrow mounds and of heart trees whispering warnings in creaks of limb. Bran dreamed, fingers knotting blankets, of a great door of black ice, and something beating on its far side. Boom, boom, each strike cracking fissures. He tasted cold so sharp it sliced the tongue, heard a raven scream a wordless warning. He woke shivering, and the direwolves howled at nothing seen. They made the neck under sleet. Howland Reed scalers guided them by hidden plank paths above the bog, dead reeds rattling like bones beneath hoof. Reed greeted Caitlin in a hut of woven willow, eyes shadowed. My eyes in the marsh saw white walk beneath the moon, 3 pale riders at the causeway's edge. Snow never settles there. The old powers move. He would not ride south. I guard the green dreams, but gave her a bundle of dragonglass spearheads found on an ancient barrow. South of Moat, Caitlin the King's Road teemed with small folk fleeing coast and field, barefoot women leading goats, coppersmiths pushing barrows, babes swaddled in turnip sacks. They parted at sight of the direwolf banners, some cheering, some silent with fear that war's shadow followed. Caitlin handed out oatcakes until her saddlebags hung limp, and still hunger gnawed the crowds. 3 days north of the Trident they met riders in Baratheon stags. Sir Roland Storm, broad as an oak, hailed them with voice like thunder. Lady Stark, Lord Stannis bids escort. Stormlanders hold the fort. His men wore green boar badges too. Horan Wild of Rainhouse rode in alliance. The Baratheon host, Roland boasted, marched by moon and tide, drawn to Harrenhal, to answer Lion Pride with storm wrath. At Maidenpool they found the town half ruined, yet banners of a white seahorse on aqua cloth flew. Davos Seaworth had sailed here with 3 Lyseni grain cogs seized as prizes. On the quay he met Caitlin, salt crystals in his beard. Robb held council of war 2 nights past, Davos said, eyes creased with worry. Euron Greyjoy's silence prowls the Mander, burning every holdfast. And rumor says dagger-tongued cell sails from Atlantis answer his call. Neos. Caitlin's breath frosted the sea wind. Tywin makes devils of krakens. Does he promise them the reach? A shorter pillage at least. They care little for fealty. Davos drew her aside. I served smuggler years enough to know Greyjoy desire. They burn till burnt. If we do not break them soon, Old Town itself may fall. Bran listened from his chair. Old Town holds the citadel. If the books burn, knowledge dies. The dragonglass secrets, the Valyrian steel. The world has less use for books than blades when raiders howl, Davos said gently. Yet without books we cannot know which blades to forge, Bran answered. They rode west to Duskendale, then bent south to Harrenhal, reaching its blackened hulks at winter's first serious bite. In ruins, lit by hundreds of torches, stood tents striped in heraldry. The red copper sun spear of Dorne, the rose, the falcon, the silver trout. New pavilions bore the sigil of a broken throne over crossed plough and sword, the emblem of the provisional realm. And thrice as many banners of petty knight or landed freeholder ringed the field, for word had spread that the fate of the 7 kingdoms would be minted here. Inside the shattered feast hall, where cracks in the roof framed stars like spear points, long trestles overflowed with what fare the lords could muster. Salt pork from the Vale, citrus from Dorne, fish from White Harbor. Robb stood at room's far end in plain gray wool, a bronze direwolf at his throat. He smiled seeing his family, but his eyes were rimmed red from sleepless weeks. Gray wind rose behind, tail swooping. Rickon raced to bury his face in the direwolf's ruff. Bran lifted a trembling hand to his brother, thoughts crowding his mouth, but Robb only squeezed his fingers and whispered, "Lauder?" In quiet. The opening council assembled at dawn beneath Harrenhal's godswood. Its weirwood was long dead, trunk split by Conqueror's dragon flame, but the stump remained, bleached and riddled like the jaw of some giant beast. Lannister envoys attended, Kevan, gaunt and gray-bearded, and Jenna with sharp eyes. They proclaimed Tywin would abide decisions ratified by full peers of the realm. Cersei was silent in the west, Joffrey named but unseen. Euron Greyjoy sent no envoy. A ship's prow worked to look a kraken's beak was set in his stead, dripping seawater beside a list of plunder demands. The talks grew heated quickly. Should Ironborn titles be revoked? Would Dorne's ancient right to self-rule be recognized? Stannis argued legality till throats dried. Mace Tyrell countered with bushels of grain and hungry mouths. Between, Doran Martell's voice lilted calm, as sand but cut like spears. Long have my people bled for wars not their own. He would pledge only if the council promised justice for Elia and her children, slain by Gregor Clegane on Tywin's orders. Robb listened, responding seldom, instead sending swift ravens to the wall and beyond. On the 5th night, Bran found him pacing in the cavernous bath chamber, where stone tubs steamed despite fractured ceilings. Maps scattered on benches, Euron's fleet positions, Tywin's march, reports of cell sails and stepstones, whispers of dragons in Korth. Robb rubbed weary eyes. I fight Tywin's claws while the realm's throat lies bare to winter. Bran wheeled forward. Dreams came again. The wall weeps. Brothers call fire from skies of snow. Jon stands atop a tower of ice, sword pale as dawn, but shadows clutch at his feet. He licked his lips, recalling the cold. Send aid north. I have no men to spare. Robb crouched before him. The stormlands hold by thread. The reach bleeds. The coast burns. Yet if the wall falls, all south will follow. Father always said wars are won by foresight. Robb's mouth quirked. Father said many true things. He rose. Come, the council must hear a boy's dreams then. Sometimes, prophecy moves hearts, even when logic fails. The hall stank of dampened horse as Bran was borne through. Lords shuffled, whispers fluttering. Robb stood quiet until torchlight stilled. Then, with every eye on Bran, he spoke of the wall's ancient oath, the first winter, the long night. My brother's dreams, I believe, for the direwolves share their truth with him. The wall may fail. He let silence linger. We must send men north. Kevan Lannister scoffed. Lord Rowan murmured of children's tales. But Brynden Tully rose and told of Hardhome whispers, shipwrecked fishermen who saw walking shadows. Davos added the story of a Lyseni captain who drifted into Eastwatch half-mad, babbling of blue eyes in fog. Stannis crossed arms, voice scraping. My God shows flames of war beyond snowfields. The boy speaks truth. Mace Tyrell at last sighed. 1 legion of my levies then. 1,000 knights, 3,000 archers, provisioned. Doran Martell offered sandspearmen hardened by desert marches, for snow is but another enemy. Even Kevan, perhaps fearing blame should doom come, granted 300 men from the Westerlands. Agreements were inked, the watch to receive grain stipends, smiths to forge arrowheads of dragonglass drawn from caches in Dragonstone's caves. Bran felt dizzy with relief, yet knew the numbers were but a thin wall against the storm he sensed. Outside Harrenhal, fields hardened beneath brittle snow crust. Euron's black sails prowled the Mander unchecked. The Reach wavered, starved villages begging Highgarden for relief. Old Town's beacon flamed orange one dusk, distress by sea. Garland Tyrell demanded swift naval reprisal. Robb convened generals in the Tower of Dread, where arrow slits framed the wide god's eye like shards of mirror. They formed twin strikes. Davos to sail north with Stormlander galleys and Manderly cogs to contest the Kraken around Shield Islands. Garland would lead Green Knights by land along the Roserad, baiting Euron inland where cavalry advantage held. But to pin Tywin's westward push, Stannis pledged to march into the Westerlands via Golden Tooth, banners of fiery heart and stag burning side by side. Robb promised northern pikes at his right. Break Tywin's hold, and the Ironborn lose their purse, Stannis said. The plan carried. Night deepened, wind wailing through cracked towers. Catelyn found Robb alone in the rookery, unrolling a final, thinner scroll. No seal identified it, only sigils inked at top. A 3-headed dragon black on red, but slashed through as if by claw. He read in hush. Daenerys Targaryen, queen in exile, offered parley. Ships of Meereen had landed at Dorne with envoys. She possessed 3 grown dragons, it claimed, wings casting shade upon palaces. She would join any who stood against Lannister rule, if they would let her set foot in Westeros. Robb's jaw tightened. A dragon queen upends everything. Allies might kneel for fire. And enemies scatter, Catelyn whispered. Yet dragons burn what they free. We cannot decide before council, Robb said, rolling the parchment. But if Tywin courts krakens, perhaps we must weigh dragons. The Ironborn struck first. A fortnight after plans forged, Word came by Raven that Euron's silence had speared the Arbor's wine fleet, roasting hulls with wildfire stolen from Cersei's hidden caches. Rains of cinder-blotted sky. Embers drifted as far as Old Town's high tower, where ravens died in flight. Tyrell outriders caught a party of Ironmen near Tumbleton, their faces tattooed in Valyrian glyphs, thralls from Essos, freed for blood sport by Euron. They laughed as they died, naming themselves Chosen of the Deep. Garland's green host met Euron near Bitterbridge, 5,000 rows and oak banners clashing against Kraken lines strung along the Mander's weed-choked banks. Euron himself led charge, helm wrought as black iron crow's beak, armor lacquered midnight. In first clash, he cut down Sir Horace Redwine and nailed the corpse to his prow. Tyrell lances broke the shield wall, yet could not cross the river under arrow fire. The battle raged for 2 days. By dusk of second, smoke-curtained valley, corpses dammed the river, and Euron slipped away upriver with half his strength, leaving the rest to drown or burn. Garland held the field, but lost 400 knights and near 2,000 foot. Worse, Ironborn still roamed at will. Old Town's beacon blazed crimson, enemy at harbor. Robb heard the news in Harrenhal's audience chamber, where flickering braziers cast giants on walls. He dismissed courtiers, paced. Every day Euron wreaks chaos. Tywin laughs. We must draw the Kraken from water. Then, Brynden leaned on table edge. So we set bait in fields he cannot resist. Grain caravans bound for Old Town, lightly guarded, rumors placed in spies' ears. When he strikes Mormont and Umber close nets inland. Risky, Catelyn said. What if he ignores bait? He won't, Robb answered. Pride guides him. He halted before dragonglass blades arrayed on sideboard. Yet we fight 3 wars, Kraken, Lion, Winter. We need one blow to shake them all. Bran, shadowed by pillars, spoke. There is a horn in Valeria's ruin, said to bind dragonfire. Euron hunts it, but dragons heed no slave long. However, another binding exists. In blood. Targaryen blood in Stark veins once, through Lyanna's line. His cheeks colored. Jon carries that. The room went still. Catelyn drew breath sharp. Dot. Are you certain? Birdsong in dream, Bran murmured. A blue flower in a wall of ice. Robb's eyes wavered, but he said only, Jon fights his own war, north of the wall. Yet if dragons fly, Brynden added, the realm will look to Dragonrider. Robb shook off thoughts. First, Tywin. Then the seas. Then, winter. We keep order. Daman. The Westerlands campaign cracked stone under Hoof-Deate. Stannis and Robb marched west through Riverland passes as snows swirled intermittent, banners rigid with rime. The Golden Tooth fell after 2 days of catapult fire. Karstark men raised wolf over lion. Towns surrendered, some cheering the chance to rid themselves of impost taxes. Yet each village they took was stripped of grain. Tywin's men had harvested early and carted off stores to the crag closer to sea supply. Hunger carved hollows in soldier cheeks. Desertions crept after bitter nights. Outside Case, fire glimmered along ridges, the lion host drawn up, 20,000, banners sewn anew after Gold Ridge rout. Tywin rode center, visor silvered, torchlight dancing on enamel. Flanking him stood Victarion Greyjoy, solemn but deadly, and sellsail captains in gaudy plumes. Far behind, supply wagons bulged with grain stolen from Reach. Snow began as both sides ranked. Robb watched flakes settle on mail, melt to rivulets. Horns called. The battle started in hush, no roar but wind. Night cloaked arrows, only sudden screams marked their fall. Direwolf and stag banners advanced, drums faint like heartbeats. At first clash, Stannis' right crumpled before Victarion's axe charge, sea-wolves, shrieking their war song. But Stannis rallied, sword burning crimson in torchlight, singing snowflakes on steel. Robb flanked left, Greatjon roaring, grey winds slashing. Near dawn Tywin's center trembled. Then horns of brass screamed from rear, Kraken banners again, but not Victarion now. Euron himself, his black ship's sails turned to capes upon 1,000 reavers cresting hill crest. They crashed into Robb's rear, long axes splitting helms. Panic rippled. Snow turned red. Caitlin, riding with maester and guards among baggage, saw shapes in storm swirl. A bird of fire! No, a torch volley chasing Arrowcross. She pressed forward, but guards held her back. Bran, further behind on a supply wagon, felt a tremor in earth, a rumble like distant avalanche. Eyes rolled white, wolf dreams seized him. In that trance he touched Grey Wind's senses, the dire wolf snapping at Ironborn, feeling a blade score flank. Bran pushed deeper, a second sight merging with beast, steering jaws aside from spear thrust, turning to leap at a drummer's throat. Pain lanced him, the connection shattered. Dawn bled across jagged ridges. Bodies lay thick. Tywin's force withdrew in columns, discipline iron even in defeat. Euron's reavers melted into snow mist carrying plunder. Robb's host held the field but paid dearly. Umber wounded nigh unto death, Maeg's eldest daughter slain. Grey Wind limped ragged. Stannis stalked lines, jaw set, counting cost of war. Another such victory and we are broke, he growled. Yet among wreckage, they found Tywin's grain, wagons left in hasty flight. Enough wheat to feed the Reach and Throne lands if hauled east. Robb ordered immediate convoy. Stannis dispatched garrisons to hold case. Night that followed saw sky awash with aurora green, shimmering curtains. Some said it boded magic unloosed. Bran dreamed of a weirwood sapling sprouting from blackened stump in Harrenhal, leaves white glass, heart-face carved anew. At Harrenhal, envoys of Daenerys arrived. Missandei of Enith and Sir Barristan Selmy, with hair snowy white beneath scarlet cloak. They bowed before council, bearing sigil of three-headed dragon fused with broken throne. Daenerys pledged aid against Euron and Tywin if granted passage and rights to old Targaryen holdings. She would land at Dragonstone after Harald Ravens flew, avoiding battle with Stormlander fleet. Stannis bristled. Dragonstone is mine. Was? Barristan answered, voice grave. By laws of conquest you once quoted, it belongs to true-born heirs. Council erupted, tempers flared. Robb raised hand. Dragons may decide wars before snow devours us. We negotiate. He proposed joint stewardship. Daenerys may garrison Dragonstone, while Stannis' fleet uses its harbor. In exchange, she would commit dragonfire against Kraken fleet. The motion carried by narrow margin, Tyrell abstaining, Dorne in favor. While negotiations churned, Bran wandered Harrenhal's empty corridors, guided by ravens on windowsills. In the ancient forge he felt heat, though embers slapped. He gathered black obsidian chips and old chains, weaving them into sigils only his dreaming mind recognized. He cast them into God's eye, watching water swallow. That same night, Jon Snow stood atop the fist of the first men, snow whipping his cloak, and felt in his palm a sudden warmth, as if some distant ember called. Ghost-raised muzzle, red eyes reflecting pale fires that danced unseen across blank sky. The grain caravan crawled toward River Run, wains lurching under weight. Robb accompanied, sword arm bandaged after duel with Ironborn champion. Near Fairmarket, outriders sighted black sails on the Trident. Euron again, upriver this time. Impossible yet true. His longships navigated narrow bends by magic or madness. They struck at dusk, rams splintering wagons, torches hurled. Grey Wind fought 3 axemen before arrow-pierced chest. The direwolf staggered. Robb knelt cradling muzzle as chaos raged. Bran's mind snapped awake miles away, felt brother's anguish through weirwood net, cried out. In mind's eye he saw a pale heart bound by brambles, blood heavy on snow. He reached, but vines thrashed, thorns biting inward. But then horns sounded south bank, Tyrell banners. Garland again, charging with fresh heavy horse, rose petals painted on shields. Lances crashed Ironborn flank. Euron's laughter echoed across water, but he withdrew downstream, leaving burning hulks. Grey Wind breathed, shallow. Maester rushed with needle and boiling wine. Robb's eyes spilled not tears, but ice. He rose after binding done, stride murderous. On burned plain he found a Kraken captain, half crushed by cart. Where's Euron's nest? The man spat blood. Where sea bleeds black. Robb dispatched him with dagger. Garland clasped Robb's arm. The Ree chose the wolf. I ride with you wherever foe leads. Robb nodded, but worry flickered toward gray wind's still form. Winter tightened. At Wall, Jon Snow watched pale shadows prowl beneath aurora skies. Ravens from south bore glass arrowheads and grain, but men were few. Wildling scouts spoke of an army of dead massing at Frostfangs. Jon penned pleas to Robb, to Stannis, to any lord with men to spare. He touched the dragonglass spearheads, wondering whether legend would hold. One dusk, a horn sounded 3 long calls. White walkers near. Jon and the few rangers rode out under ghostly lights, spines prickling. In a ravine they found slaughtered elk, flesh peeled in patterns like frozen roses. Snow crunched behind. Jon turned, sword raising, as blue-eyed corpses shuffled from mists. Ghost sprang, silent rage. Steel shattered like glass. Only dragonglass found purchase, sizzling as it pierced. But for each walker slain, 2 more advanced. Retreat became flight. They gained the wall's shadow by dawn. Half their number lost. Jon knew then letters were not enough. They needed fire, blades of dawn, dragons maybe. Dragonstone throbbed with distant wings. Daenerys Targaryen landed under gray sky, Drogon's shadow stretching across breakers. Stannis met her beachside, cloak whipping. Words were terse. Yet when the queen knelt to touch black sand and swore no crown but justice until winter's end, Stannis inclined head the barest degree. Robb sailed from Maidenpool to treat. On terrace before painted table, they forged pact. Dragonfire for Kraken fleet. Stark and Baratheon support to seat Daenerys when war ended, subject to realm's council vote. Tyrion drafted clauses till quill split. Barristan offered sword to Robb's command until Tywin answered for Aelius' blood. 3 dragons wheeled over bay that evening, their cries echoing like prophecy across narrow sea. Euron struck Old Town on midwinter's eve. Silence led 8 great Dromons through harbor boom with wildfire-proud ram. The Hightower's beacon exploded in green flame. Yet as Kraken forces swarmed docks, skies roared. Drogon descended in a furnace wind, Rhaegal and Viserion flanking. Dragonfire swept ships to cinder. Sails blossomed into burning wings. On ramparts, Archmaester Peristan gasped as books he feared to lose were saved by fire's might. Euron faced flames and laughed, leapt from prow into sea foam streaked green. Some say he vanished beneath swelling smoke. Others swear a Kraken's tentacle drew him down. Without their dread captain, Ironborn broke. Tyrell galleys, Devos stormcrows, and Manderley's heavy cogs encircled harbor. A song rose above clash. The sailors of Old Town chanting thanks to mother and maiden both. Robb stood at Dragonstone's parapet when the Raven arrived. He read, eyes bright in torch glow. Victory. Old Town saved. Euron lost. Grain roots open tower. He exhaled first full breath in moons. Catelyn, still at Harrenhal guiding refugees, allowed herself a smile when Raven reached her tower. But Bran in his dreams saw only the wall, cracks widening, blue fires glimmering. Tywin, now cornered in craglands, summoned banners for final stand. Yet allies dwindled. The Selsale captains fled at Dragon Rumor. Victarion returned to Pike to contest Kingsmoot, Ironborn brothers quarreling. Kevan counseled negotiation. Tywin scorned him. But letters from Casterly Rock spoke of famine riots in Lannisport, trade choked by Tyrell blockade, mines yielding less gold. He agreed to parley at the Crossroads Inn, neutral ground. Robb rode with Brynden and Barristan, Stannis with Davos. Mace sent his son Loras, still limping after wildfire scars. Tywin arrived helmed, flanked only by silent brothers bearing coffins, symbol of what awaited if his house fell. The talks dragged, demands for absolution, for lion primacy. Robb offered leniency. Retain Casterly Rock. Relinquish crown claim. Stand trial for war crimes. Tywin rose, cloak swirling. I do not kneel. He departed. That night, an assassin scaled Tywin's tent. Tywin's men found the intruder dead, lips blue, a strange coin on tongue. The Braavosi Titans. Rumor flew. Iron Bank called in debts. They wanted war ended lest coin bleed worthless. Tywin lost sleep thereafter, haunted by shadows behind cuirass clasps. Jon Snow at the wall received one final raven from Robb. Help rides north, hold fast. With it came a small cage. Inside, a sapling weirwood no thicker than Jon's thumb. Bran's hand had tended its roots in godswood soil, binding dragonglass chips round stem. Jon planted it at the wall's base, ghost watching. The tree took root in frozen earth, leaves unfurling blood red even in night frost. When moonlight struck, the leaves whispered like distant wolves. On the first day of the new year, ice cracked like thunder east of the Shadow Tower. A white wind bore screams. The dead marched. Jon stood upon battlements, cloaks snapping, as horns wailed 3 long blasts. Men rushed, torches flaring. In torchlight Jon glimpsed a figure on undead stallion, tall crown of ice, eyes star blue. The Night King, whispered legend, naming a Stark of old. Dragonglass arrows loosed found marks, but ranks of wights climbed piled bodies. Jon rallied, sword longclaw clashing. Ghost dragged corpses from parapet, but numbers overwhelmed. Sudden roar split frost, dragonfire gold and green. Rhaegal swept along wall's length, flames washing dead. Daenerys rode astride, eyes fierce. Behind, north of wall, Bran's ravens swarmed in black cloud, diving at blue flames. Jon ordered gates open to field below, where combined troops formed shield wall of Stormlander and Northern volunteers sent weeks before. They held line as dragonfire carved trenches of boiling slush. Night King raised hand, ice spears hurtled. One struck Rhaegal's wing. Dragon shrieked, banking hard. Daenerys clung. Jon scrambled down switchback stairs, leapt through gate to field as white surged anew. Snow blinded, steel rang. Somewhere, ghost yelped. Jon felt the weirwood saplings pulse against earth, warmth threaded through frozen boots. As white lunged, Jon's blade flared silver. Longclaw alive with eerie light. He remembered Bran's talk of dawn. He swung. The white dissolved. Night King turned icy gaze. Sword of crystal rose. Jon advanced. Heart hammering. Clouds spilled moon, casting glow on duel. Steel met ice. Sparks frost blue. Jon faltered under unnatural strength. The Ice King raised blade for final hue, when roar split again, Drogon this time. Black shadow blazing. Fire engulfed icy crown, but flame turned blue where magic clashed. Jon, sating chance, plunged Longclaw deep. Blade melted through brittle ice. Night King burst in cracking shards. A sound like winter dying swept valley. Whites froze mid-stride, fell to snow unmoving. Silence, then cheers ragged. Horizon glimmered rose as dawn crept. Jon looked to Daenerys atop Drogon, nod of respect passing. The war for life had gained first victory. Ravens crossed realm with news. Night King slain, wall holds, dragons fight for living. Small folk lit bonfires of thanks. In crag camp, Tywin read the letters under flickering candle. His fist trembled once, then he summoned Kevan and said one word. Enough. At Harrenhal, council gathered anew. Tywin Grey entered humbly, sword laid at Robb's feet. He offered submission, trial, reparations, gold for widows, ships for coast, oath to defend realm against winter threat. Some lords clamored for his head, others saw wisdom in gold. Robb listened, then raised eyes to throne-forged plowshare hung above dais. The realm shall judge. Tywin would face tribunal of the 7 at Baelor's Sept, rebuilt with Tyrell coin. Guilt would mean life at the wall, stripped of name. He bowed. Peace, tentative, seat. Ironborn chiefs bent knee to Queen Daenerys after dragons torched Pike's towers. Greyjoy fleet harried no more. Lannister banners furled. Roses climbed Ramunda. Dorne sent oranges for feast. Winter, though, kept claws. Snows deepened, rivers froze, but grain stores filled, and fires burned bright. At Winterfell, Catelyn tended sick, Bran learned Greenseer arts, Rickon trained with spear. Robb visited, after ice thaw, sitting in Wintertown Inn with commoners, listening to tales. One dusk he climbed Broken Tower where he once watched the sky as boy. Grey wind, scarred but alive, lay at his feet. Catelyn joined him. "Much remains," he said, gaze on horizon burning gold. "A council to seat rulers, dragons to settle, winter to survive. And after? Spring," he breathed. "A realm of plows, not thrones. We'll plant trees where swords once clashed." Catelyn set hand on his. Below, children skated frozen pond, laughter echoing. Wolf, dragon, stag, rose, sun, all banners fluttered without clash in courtyard breeze. For first time she truly believed the old words. Winter may come, but spring follows, and with it the stubborn green of new beginnings. Moonlight sheathed the young Wolf King in an argent hush as he stared across Winterfell's courtyard at the children skating. Their fragile laughter carried like frost bells on the night air, echoing through half-mended keeps and across drifts that gleamed blue beneath the stars. Catelyn felt that sound settle in her chest, a crystalline hope that rang against old grief. It would be easy, she thought, to believe peace settled here for good, but the world beyond the wall still shivered with lashes of winter and the echoes of war, and both of them knew it. She followed Robb down the tower stair. The flagstones glimmered with meltwater. Torch smoke drifted, fragrant with pine resin. In the hall below, Galbart Glover paced before the hearth, his gaunt face lined by orange light. "Ravens," he said without preamble, and thrust forward a sealed tube. The wax bore Jon Snow's direwolf, and the black sword of the watch quartered together, his own makeshift sigil. Robb broke the seal. Catelyn tilted the parchment toward the fire. Snow's hand was spare but urgent. "Dead still stir, east of Frostfangs. Whites gather at Lake Long. Your aid held the wall, but gap vast. Rations thin. Wildlings uneasy. Send more dragonglass. Dragonglass arrows effective. Queen's dragons invaluable, but cannot winter here without feed. And they are not enough." Below, a sharper line, as if quill pressed harder. "Bring Bran if you can." Ravens whisper of him in weirwood roots. Wall listens when he speaks. Robb's mouth tightened, and Catelyn sensed the weight he felt every time his brother's name rose attached to omens. He read the rest. A list of needed healers and blacksmiths, and a tally of dead, and folded the parchment. "The wall still bleeds," he murmured. "Winterfell can spare potatoes and salt pork," Glover said. "The port at Eastwatch remains ice-choked, but White Harbor carpenters are carving sledges to run up the King's Road." Catelyn saw the numbers scrawled by Jon. 1,300 brothers alive, 200 wounded, too weak for duty. Wildling clans, close on 3,000, camped in the haunted forest. If the watch starved, the wildlings might break south again. "Supplies are life," she said, "but they'll need men as well. The tribunal calls you to King's Landing in little more than a month. The North cannot send its whole strength both south and north." Nabistain. Robb's brow furrowed, shadowed beneath firelight. "We stand on a knife's edge. Daenerys will not tarry forever. Her counselors urge she press Lannister lands before Tywin gathers new sellswords. Yet every sword we pull south is a blade the walkers might feel north." "The walker's king is ash," Glover reminded. "Maybe what remains can be held by fewer men. Maybe. Or maybe the shadow we saw was only one face of a darker storm." "Nad." He moved to map table and set small iron figurines. Direwolf for Winterfell, stag for Stannis, dragon for Daenerys. Around a piece of river-smooth glass he used to mark uncertain threats. That glass now sat at the wall. Beside it he placed another, colorless, for Tywin's fate. And one more, black as coal, for the Iron Bank's quiet, watchful interest. "The tribunal," Catelyn said softly, "is your last tether to the south. When it ends, You might finally ride north with all you have and meet the dark in its own country. And if the tribunal collapses, if Tywin twists free, Robb exhaled. I will not leave him unbound to prey on our flanks. Glover's hand drifted to knife hilt. Then bind him tight enough he cannot wriggle loose. But ride you must, one way or the other. Winter grows. Catelyn half smiled at the soldier's bluntness. Spoken like a man who knows the measure of a journey. Robb lifted head. I will go to King's Landing with a token company only. Grey Wind stays here to heal. The Karstark levies can escort grain to the wall. 3,000 spears should suffice. Bran will ride with them if his dreams bid. He met his mother's eyes. You'll remain. Our folk trust your hand. She wanted to protest. The thought of her son facing the schemers of King's Landing again chilled her worse than any northern wind. Yet she saw the truth. Winterfell's hope for spring still needed shaping. She could guide Rickon, soothe small folk, and hold the North's heart steady. She touched his cheek. Her fingers lingered where the frost had reddened his skin. Then send ravens quick, she said. Move before second-guess Ben's resolve. 3 days later, banners flapped over Wintertown like a frozen orchard of color. Dawn revealed river ice creaking and starlings bursting in black clouds into the pale sky. Robb dismissed half the garrison to Glover's command and ordered the remainder south in stripped-down columns. He wore no crown, only a plain fur mantle fastened by iron wolf head. The cold morning rang with hoofbeats and the clang of cart chains, and Catelyn kissed his brow at the gate. Go without fear, she told him, though fear gnawed inside her. He smiled. That crooked boyish flash that survived all wars and wheeled his destroyer. Behind him rode Barristan Selmy and a compact honor guard of 50. Men from Riverlands and Vale, one Mormont, 2 crimson-cloaked turncoats who had sworn new oath. The gates parted, steel hinges groaning like old sleepers waking, and the king's small train vanished into white swirl. Bran watched from a balcony above the yard. Snow thick in his cloak hood. He lifted hand in silent farewell and closed eyes. For a moment he saw through silent weirwoods that lined the King's Road. Their red leaves whispered of travel, of thousands of footprints, of the distant echo of dragon wings beating air now brittle with winter. Farther the vision spun, crossing leagues in an eye blink until he felt the wall again, a hard white line scarring the dark. Below, fires twinkled, hot bright beads. Above, northern lights shimmered faint, drained as if power spent in recent clash. Bran sensed something uneasy still by the Frostfang peaks, but it watched and did not move. For now, he opened eyes to biting cold and wheeled his chair back indoors. Shaggy Dog loped beside, padding silent as shadow. Robb rode hard south, covering leagues outrageous for winter roads. He cut across divisions of slush and the broken remnants of old battles. Villages stared at him, astonished. The rumor of his passing flew ahead on crow wings. Folk pressed hot turnip stew and brown bread into soldier hands. They blessed him with old gods' names and new. Twice they fought scouts wearing the Crimson Hearth Lion of Crakehall, a splinter group refusing Tywin's surrender. At Wood's Edge, they caught 5 looters dragging a miller's daughter into the trees. Barristan saw justice done with cold steel. By the first full moon of year they approached the Green Fork again, where ice floes bumped each other like silent bells. Houses built of stone appeared, some shelled by war, but flame-lit in windows once more. They passed the twins. Frey's now subordinate to Lady Stoneheart's ruthless justice. A chill passed Robb as he saw shapes hung under archways, frozen hard and swinging. No banners draped those bodies. The cold alone marked their guilt. Brynden met them near Seaguard, where Mallister ships escorted grain convoys south. The Blackfish's face looked thinner, weathered by endless duty. Tywin reached the city yesterday, he said, voice pitched low. The trial begins on the Feast of the Seven. Then we are neither early nor late, Robb answered. Any new plots? Rumors that Iron Bank creditors nest thick in the capital, bribing Faith militant to keep trials strict. Jenna Lannister wields coin as deft as some men's swords, and whispers of sparrows preaching against dragons to stoke fear of foreign queen. Robb's mouth thinned. Fear breeds quick in winter. We'll see what flames they tend. They reached King's Landing after 15 days' ride. The city looked different than Robb last saw. Repairs marched up the hill in scaffolds. The melted throne's vacant dais stood ringed by marble benches for council. They called it the conclave. Around the city, vegetable plots stretched between charred houses. Children gathered dung for cook fires. Overall, a hush. The hush of survivors waiting for Shu's second fall. Robb's party dismounted at the Red Keep's gatehouse where gold cloaks, most now bearing sewn direwolf patches on sleeves, saluted. Ser Bronn of the Blackwater, installed as captain after betraying Cersei's last conspirators, greeted Robb with irreverent grin. "King in the north," he drawled. "Glad to see fresh northern ale stocks. We've casks that cry for friends." Robb offered a nod and passed by. Inside Maegor's holdfast, Tyrion waited beneath a stained glass window that cast fractured rainbows. "The city is yours to walk," he said. "But keep companions close. Old loyalties die slower than we hope." "The same could be said for grudges," Robb replied. Tyrion's mismatched eyes flickered. "And mine bite ankles yet sometimes." They spoke of Tywin's arrival. The Lord of Casterly Rock now quartered in the Sept's guest houses, guarded by silent brothers to ensure he did not flee nor suffer accident. The High Septon, Bald Sparran, had insisted none but faith guardians hold him. Robb wondered if that protected Tywin more from angry smallfolk or angry nobles. Daenerys had not sailed upriver. She remained at Dragonstone, nursing dragons' wings torn by frost. Her envoy, Missandei, sat daily with Sept scribes drafting charters to limit dragonflight above densely populated regions, a concession to fearful noble houses. Stannis resided in the Tower of the Hand, his discipline hammering city watch into nightly patrols. And Doran's envoys pushed for Aelius justice. 3 courts listening, Tyrion said, and each with separate thirst. The 7 for sin, the conclave for politics, and small folk simply want bread. Tywin must appease all or bleed. Nah. Justice is not appeasement. I agree, but choose the wrong mask for justice and you earn riot instead. On the Feast of the Seven, processions wound through streets dusted white by powder snow. Bells rang with solemn single strokes. Tywin Lannister, clad in subdued dark, entered the Sept of Baelor under armed escort. The Sept, long scorched by wildfire in past years, had been roofed in fresh green-tinted glass. Sunlight rained emerald and jade upon mosaic floor. 7 new statues rose, hammered from melted throne iron, the mother cradling a plowshare, the father holding book not sword. Robb sat among conclave benches with Stannis, Mace Tyrell and Princess Arianne Martell. Sandor Clegane stood guard near western alcove, face half-shadow. High Septon Tebald, broad and austere, intoned charges. By witness of gods and men, Tywin of House Lannister stands accused of murder under guest right, conspiracy to use wildfire on innocents, and unleashing reavers upon the realm. Tywin kneeled, but pride stiffened his spine. "I answer," he said, voice echoing. "Where guilt is mine, I bear it." He confessed, orchestrating Red Wedding's first designs, blamed Roose Bolton and Walder Frey for crossing final lines. He admitted sanction of Gregor Clegane's rampage. But he denied ordering wildfire beneath King's Landing, though evidence placed gold from Casterly Rock in alchemists' pockets. He spoke of duty, of how his aim had been realm's unity. "A divided kingdom invites foreign conquest," he said, eyes resting on Arianne Martell, an empty seat marked for Daenerys' envoys. Throughout, murmurs rippled. Then Barristan Selmy stepped forward, white cloak catching green light. He testified to Ilya's screams, to the sack of King's Landing by Lannisters disguised as friends. His voice never wavered, but pain hung on each syllable. Doran's envoy bowed head, even Tywin's iron composure cracked a breath. Next the Hall-herd peasants burned at field by Blackwater, widows of River Run, men who lost sons to ironborn raiders armed with Lannister-funded ships. Every story laid another stone on scales. As sun arced, Jon Arryn's old friend Maester Coleman produced letters between Cersei and Tywin, Orders to gather wildfire stores. Tyrion escorted the Grey Maester, face blank. Tywin read those sigils and his lips folded thin. High Septon withdrew to pray at dusk, promising verdict at dawn. Tywin walked back under silent guard. Outside the sept gates, small folk pressed close, eyes glittering with the hunger of years. One ragged woman hurled a rotten turnip that burst against the Lion Lord's shoulder. Gold cloaks shoved crowd back. A hush spread. In torchlight, Tywin turned to the woman. He took off his cloak, stained green from turnip, and placed it around her thin shoulders. "The war stole from you," he said, voice clear. "May peace return it." The woman wept. Guards hustled him onward, but many saw that gesture and wondered, was this mercy or manipulation? That night, Robb wandered Great Sept's cloisters. Snow drifted through missing panes, dusting pews. He thought of his father's quiet honor, of Walder Frey's grim death beneath ice, and of all the graves that followed. If Tywin lived, would ghosts rest? If Tywin died, would peace crumble? He found Tyrion in alcove, nursing cup of hot mulled wine. "My father would rather break than bend," Tyrion said after silence. "Yet sometimes even stone yields under frost. You think he'll accept exile to the wall? If those are the only boards left on the Savas table, perhaps. The question is, will the realm accept such mercy?" Robb considered weaving justice, harsh enough to satisfy blood, yet spare realm new war. "Tomorrow we learn," he said. Both turned as footfalls echoed. Princess Arianne stepped from shadows, austere in orange cloak. "Dorne wants blood," she said simply. "But blood alone won't warm children in winter. If he lives, we require guarantee. Sandor Clegane suggests an exchange. Tywin joins the watch, but his wealth, seized, rebuilds the realm." Tyrion snorted. "Strip a lion's den of gold and leave him to rats." He might agree, so his line endures free. Arianne's dark eyes glittered. "His line sits in ruin. Jenna begs coin from Bravos to feed Lannisport." Robb pondered the idea of funneling Lannister fortune into granaries and caravan roads. The Iron Bank would approve. They valued repayment. But Tywin's pride? Could he surrender all the rock's gold? "Tomorrow," he repeated and parted. Dawn's dim pink spilled through new glass as crowd packed square. Robb stood near statues, breath clouding. The High Septon's verdict rang, amplified by hush. "For crimes proven and admitted, Tywin Lannister shall forfeit lands, titles, and the wealth of Casterly Rock to the realm's care. To succor those harmed, he shall take black and serve the Night's Watch until death. Should oath be broken, his life is forfeit to 7 kingdoms alike." A susurrus swept benches. Some cried unfair lenience, others praiseful. Tywin's eyes shuddered, but he inclined head, a motion small yet seismic. Kevin stepped forward, hand trembling on sword pommel. "The rock will stand under Gyrion's boy Martin, with regents appointed." He met Robb's gaze. "We will not rise again in war." The tribunal pronounced peace, but tests came quick. Outside Sept, angry Faith militant blocked Tywin's escort. Brothers of Bone Masks shouted for head. Tebbold spread arms and intoned prayer until crowd parted. But rumors churned rest of day. Sparrows rumored to storm a grain store. Tyrell guards rumored to whip them. Dorne alleged to bribe gold cloaks. Each spark threatened blaze. Robb, as protector, convened conclave in throne hall. Dragon silhouettes danced on walls from braziers. They melted old iron into curved hearth screens. Talk ran heated until Tyrion proposed distributing Tywin's seized gold immediately into bread subsidies. Garland Tyrell promised Reach granaries could match coin with wheat if roads remained open. Dorne would escort caravans through stepstones to cut sea delay. The motion passed. The relief wagons rolled within 2 days. Bread lines shortened. Small folk spirits rose. Tywin, stripped of finery, rode north in a humble cage cart beneath watch of Jor Mormont's son Jorah, returned from exile wearing black. Robb watched wheels crunch away at River Gate, wondering if mercy always cost so dear. In Dragonstone's great hall, Daenerys Targaryen learned a verdict. She paced black glass floor, firelight winking in gemstone eyes of carved table dragons. "He breathes," she said thinly, remembering her brother Viserys' tales of infant Aegon dashed against wall. Barristan knelt. "Justice of realm requires mercy sometimes." Daenerys released breath. "Then we will live with it, for now." In Storm's End, Stannis forged ravens to north, with orders for icy siege engines carved to roll on frozen ground. He meant to meet Night's army before it rose anew. Davos, leaning heavily on rail after months at sea, counseled caution. Stannis replied, "My duty's north." Back in King's Landing, Robb met Queen Daenerys at long last. She sailed upriver in sleek galley painted red, Drogon soaring overhead. Crowds gasped as dragon shadow washed walls. In Parley Garden overlooking Blackwater, they spoke alone, wolf and dragon. Daenerys' hair glimmered silver pale, Robb's curls copper. She studied him with violet eyes. "You broke the chains of the South," she said. "Will you break the wheel altogether?" "I aim to mend it so it serves," he answered. They discussed famine, rebuilding, winter, dark. Dragons could not hunt enough goats near North's frozen moors, but new Valyrian greenhouse designs, broad panes of glass warmed by coal fires, could grow feed. Daenerys promised to pony men skilled in such craft if Robb sent timber. They sealed bargain with clasp of wrists. Still, some conclave members feared dragons inside wall. Robb proposed stationing them on Crackclaw Point, a day's flight, but remote. Daenerys agreed. They prefer sea wind. Autumn stepped quietly out of winter's grasp at last, though snow still crouched under forest eaves. In those months, Jon Snow drove white remnants beyond Frostfangs, guided by dragonglass arrows and wildling trappers. Northmen, under Mormont's banner, joined, and Tywin, now brother no-name cloaked in black, arrived with a single mule and stern silence. Jon greeted him politely, duty first. Tywin's back bent beneath weight of supplies. He spoke little, but once Jon caught the former lord staring at walls, endless horizon, as if measuring it for great walls of gold that might have been. Hard labor and night cold hammered arrogance from him. Some brothers pitied, others jeered. Jon set them straight quickly. Each man's past burned away at Oathfire. Bran soon arrived, drawn by vision. On wind-swept night, he knelt in ice cave before heart tree grown from sapling had sent. It had thrived, its red leaves flicker crimson under lanterns, roots clawing into walls core stone. Bran placed palm on trunk and listened. He heard faint weeping from far north, the remaining others, leaderless, confused, still dangerous. But deeper he heard voices older, the children of the forest, whispering of last sanctuary under caves of the shivering sea. He learned the wall's binding spell frayed when Night King died. Strength anchored by spiral of weirwoods set ages ago. Bran must mend net before next moon cycle or ice spirits might seep south unseen. He convened council of rangers and free folk seers. Together they carved symbols in dragonglass, lashed them into lattice along tunnels beneath each castle. Tywin labored beside Jon, chiseling niches. Under aurora sky, Bran sang ancient tongue, and ravens perched on shoulders. When final shard slotted, a hum tremored through ice like great gong struck. Light poured along ramparts, faint but perceivable. The wall glowed then settled. Jon felt something ease, like wound stitched. Far south, the reach bloomed again. Garland and Brienne of Tarth oversaw harvests guarded by rose and lily banners. Euron's body never surfaced, but his fleet, rudderless, scattered. Victarion's faction warred with Harlaws. The Iron Islands turned inward. Yet beyond Stepstone's brood threat new. Cell lords, impoverished by peace, pledged to slaver princes of Yunkai, who swore vengeance for Maraine's freedom. They gathered a war of chains fleet, intending to strike Westeros while dragons wintered. Spies brought word. Daenerys prepared. Robb in council offered northern longships to supplement Dragon Queen's armada. He would not fight across sea, but he would defend coast. The conclave voted funds for harbor ballistae and signal towers. Tyrells built gardens of herbs to cure summer plagues. Dorn opened wine roads to trade. Slowly, a patchwork kingdom knitted. One frigid morning, Robb walked King's Road north again. He rode alone, save for small retinue, dragons wheeling distant. War was behind, though scars remained on fields. At Moat Cailin he parted from his southfolk and crossed Causeway to Winterfell as Aurora kindled violet bands. The castle's rebuilt walls gleamed. Caitlin awaited on parapet with Rickon and Sansa, who had decided to remain north rebuilding Needlehall Orphanage. Joy shadowed by grief for those absent, but still joy. In hall that eve, as hearths roared, Glover announced grain convoys reached every holdfast. White Harbor shipyards launched new icebreakers, and wildling children attended Maester's lessons within Winterfell's old sept. Then they ate mutton stew thick with carrots, and for dessert, apple tarts dusted with snow sugar. Later, beneath Hearttree crimson with lanterns, Bran spoke. The land breathes again. Ghosts whisper thanks. He looked at Robb. But watchful peace is still peace. Guard it. Robb nodded, resting sword on knee. Clouds parted. Stars wheeled, patient. Winter yet ruled, but its yoke lightened. In stillness Robb heard faint echo, wolves howling in distant forests, dragons answering with thunderous screams above sea, and children's laughter entwined between, soft and bright. He wondered if perhaps these sounds together formed a single song, music of a realm not of conquest, but of wary kinship. Wolf, dragon, stag, rose, spear, sun, kraken, and even the humbled lion, all threads in tapestry stronger than any alone. Snowflakes drifted upon leaf and hair. Robb closed eyes, feeling chill and warmth braid inside him. He did not know if storied bards would sing this fragile era, nor if spring would bloom as they wished. But he believed that, the old gods whispered through rustling leaves, was seed enough.